Between 1951 and 1973, two people sat in a room in India and generated a 6,000-page chronological record. These 13 volumes exist outside the traditions of devotional sermons or spiritual rulebooks. The text functions as an anatomical logbook. It documents a 22-year immersion into the physical transformation of human cellular matter. The author's own handwriting defines the purpose of the work. "Do not take my words for a teaching." She describes her words as an active force. They are intended for a specific physiological purpose and lose their meaning when separated from that context. To understand the nature of this experiment, we must decode its chronology. The 22-year record shows exactly how a philosophical inquiry mutated into a severe physical crisis. The primary data collection method relied on hundreds of audio-recorded conversations held in a single isolated room. The project centered on two people, Mira Alfassa, known as the mother, who acted as the physical instrument for the work, and Sat Prem, her transcriber. Neither participant initially realized they were producing a unified historical document. This lack of awareness led to sizable gaps in the early text and the omission of many questions. The first 7 years served as a preparatory phase. They were building the resilience needed to survive what they called the Great Passage. Because the project lacked an initial master plan, these early volumes represent raw, unfiltered data points rather than a pre-designed manifesto. The timeline begins in the 1950s with Volume 1, marking the official start of the recorded experiment. By 1961, Volume 2 identifies the central problem, the search for the absolute reality of matter. The logbook defines transformation as the act of uncovering. It is the process of reaching a physical reality but is already inherently present within the body's substance. Reaching this state required absolute silence. The subject had to hold the intellect toward a single truth until the ordinary functioning of the mind ceased. This intellectual phase was grueling. The entries describe tremendous mental tension and a constant struggle to keep the cognitive mind quiet. While these early volumes established the theoretical baseline, the experiment was moving toward a threshold where philosophy would be replaced by biology. In March and April of 1962, a physical shift forced the mother to permanently retire to her upstairs room. Volume 3 documents a new complexity, termed decentralization. The normal cohesive force of the body's cells began to fail. The logbook describes a mechanical reversal. The centripetal force holding the cells together inverted into a centrifugal force, actively dispersing them. This state resulted in severe fainting spells and a loss of bodily boundaries. The records describe a sensation of the body's material substance spreading physically over the world. By Volume 4 in 1963, this dispersed cellular state had become the new baseline for the experiment. Following this initial cellular shock, the pace of the work slowed to what the mother described as a snail's pace. Volumes 3 and 4 track the transition from intellectual dialogue to an acute physiological mutation. Volumes 5 through 10 cover a decade of monotonous daily labor. They record the hour-by-hour removal of ingrained biological habits and moral preconceptions. During this phase, friction grew between the raw work of the experiment and the public-facing ashram institution. The institution began publishing selective excerpts of the recordings under the title Notes on the Way, attempting to package the trial for public consumption. Despite this external pressure, Volume 11 records a breakthrough in 1970. The mother documented the emergence of a somatic mind. This was a state where the body's cells formed an independent intelligence that operated outside of cognitive thought. A paradox had formed. Just as the physical body was achieving this new level of independent vision, the institution was tightening its control over the narrative. Volume 12 shows a sharp decline in the amount of recorded data. The entries describe the mother's increasing inability to remember the agenda itself. The final entry, Volume 13, characterizes the period as an hour of fire and prayer. The record shatters into brief, fragmented revelations. The recording process deteriorated at the same time the physiological work reached its most extreme threshold. The historical rupture occurred on May 19, 1973. On that day, the disciples permanently closed the mother's door to Satprem. The text asserts that this lockout was driven by a desire to take ownership of the movement's legacy. The experiment was halted by institutional politics, while the biological trial was in its most critical phase. The chronological arc began in the intellect, progressed through cellular breakdown, achieved a somatic mind, and terminated in an institutional crash. These 6,000 pages represent an unfinished blueprint for a biological mutation. The text highlights how the radical work was eventually denatured and managed by a new administrative hierarchy. The central claim of the agenda remains: it was a documented attempt to force earthly matter to pass through death without dying from it. The record survives today because a single transcriber captured the raw data of this attempted biological crossing before the door was closed.